We always talk about the cloud like it's um, this magical, weightless entity floating above us.
Right, like it just exists out there in the ether.
Exactly. You upload a file or, you ask an artificial intelligence some complex question, and the heavy lifting just sort of vanishes. It feels clean. It feels completely invisible.
Yeah, the terminology itself really does a lot of the heavy lifting there. I mean, calling it the cloud makes the entire system feel, I don't know, detached from physical reality.
hmm
It leads us to imagine our data just floating in the atmosphere, totally free from gravity.
But the truth is, the cloud actually weighs millions of tons. It is incredibly heavy. I mean, it's built out of thousands of miles of copper wire, highly customized silicon, sprawling diesel generator farms, and these massive submarine cables stretching across the freezing ocean floor.
Oh, absolutely. It is intensely tethered to the physical world. And the friction between our digital ambitions and our physical limitations has, well, it's probably never been more pronounced than it is right now.
Yeah, so welcome to our deep dive. Whether you're, prepping for a crucial meeting, trying to catch up on an industry that changes by the hour, or you're just insanely curious about how the world works, we were really thrilled you're sitting down with us today.
We definitely are.
We have an imposing stack of briefings from today, Friday, April 24, 2026. And our mission today is to connect the dots between global geopolitical tensions, a massive structural shift in how big tech spends its money, and the very real ways these changes are crashing into our physical world.
Right, from classrooms down to your daily commute. The
Exactly.
physical weight of the digital world. It's really the perfect lens for examining our sources today. Because, when you strip away the sleek software interfaces, technology is ultimately bound by physical choke points, raw hardware materials, and, of course, human labor.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really understand the modern tech supply chain, we kind of have to start by zooming way out and looking at the world map. We can't really talk about silicon and servers without talking about the actual oceans they cross to get here.
Right, and the macro view is incredibly tense at this exact moment. Just this week, Iran's Revolutionary Guard seized two commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz.
Wow. And this happened despite a pretty high-level diplomatic effort to pause the conflict, right?
Did, yeah.
President Trump actually extended the U.S. Iran ceasefire indefinitely. He stated he was honoring a request from Pakistan to give Tehran time to submit a unified proposal to end the war.
Which is an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and for anyone wondering why Pakistan is stepping in as the mediator here, I mean, they share a volatile border with Iran, but they also maintain deep diplomatic channels with Washington. They desperately need regional stability to protect their own economic trade corridors.
But, the situation on the water tells a completely different story. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi declared the ongoing U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports an act of war and a ceasefire violation. He claimed these commercial ship seizures were a direct, proportionate response.
Right. And, as impartial observers of these geopolitical maneuvers, we obviously aren't taking any political sides here. We're simply reporting the facts of the global standoff exactly as they're laid out in our briefings.
Exactly. And the factual reality is that the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed to standard commercial transit right now.
Which is just an enormous bottleneck. I mean, roughly 20% of the world's global oil passes through that specific geographic strait.
20%? That's massive.
Yeah, so shipping companies are having to reroute their tankers all the way around the Horn of Africa. And that introduces staggering delays and skyrocketing logistical costs.
Meanwhile, over in Europe, the EU finally approved that $106 billion loan package to support Ukraine's economic and military needs.
Oh, right. That package had been deadlocked for months, hadn't it?
It really had. Hungary and Slovakia had basically blocked the deal after Russian oil deliveries via the Druzhba pipeline were cut back in January. And those vetoes were only dropped this week when Russia actually resumed that oil flow to both countries.
It all comes back to the physical oil.
It always does. The EU also had to completely restructure the loan's mechanics because Belgium blocked the original plan. They were initially going to use frozen Russian assets as the financial collateral, but that fell through.
Man, we're also seeing these physical resources dictate diplomatic agreements in the Middle East, where the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire was just extended for 3 additional weeks following peace talks at the White House.
Right. But analysts in our briefings are quick to caution that the underlying physical issues there, like where the actual borders are drawn in the dirt, the mechanics of disarmament, the financing for physical reconstruction, all of that is still completely unresolved.
So as someone listening to this, you might be sitting there wondering, why a naval standoff in the Middle East or a pipeline dispute in Europe actually matters to your daily life or your local community. Like, how do these distant events actually reach us?
Well, it really comes down to supply chain stress tests and domestic impacts. Let's look at the Hormuz closure, for example. Yes, it spikes global oil prices. But more importantly for the tech sector, it threatens the transport of rare earth materials and refined components.
The stuff shipped from Asia to Western electronics manufacturers, right?
Exactly. The digital world relies on those physical ships navigating that specific body of water.
And locally, I mean, it hits incredibly close to home through a mechanism called spot pricing.
Right.
Let's say your local school district needs diesel for its bus fleet. Some districts lock in a guaranteed fuel rate for the whole year, but many operate on spot pricing, meaning they just buy fuel month to month based on current market value.
Right, which is super risky right now.
Exactly. When a strait closes globally, oil jumps, and suddenly it costs a district 30% more to run the buses that very week. It just completely strains their entire budget.
And on the flip side of that, the Ukraine loan and the Lebanon ceasefire represent literally billions of dollars in incoming tech opportunities. Rebuilding a nation's infrastructure means massive contracts.
So like reconstructing sovereign cloud systems.
Yes, cloud systems, deploying new battlefield communications, laying thousands of miles of fresh telecom fiber networks just to replace what's been destroyed.
It's like looking at the global economy's nervous system.
Yeah.
A pinched nerve in the Strait of Hormuz makes a local school district's transportation budget in the U.S. twitch. Everything is physically connected.
It really is.
And those very supply lines we just talked about are carrying the hardware that tech giants are currently engaged in a massive bidding war over.
Yeah, they are executing a sweeping pivot right now.
Yeah.
They're shifting their available capital directly away from human labor and pouring it all into physical infrastructure. I mean, the numbers hitting the wire this week are just staggering.
Let's look at the human cost first. Meta just confirmed it is laying off approximately 8,000 workers. Yeah, which accounts for about 10% of its global staff.
Yeah.
And they're simultaneously closing 6,000 open roles.
And on the exact same day, Microsoft announced voluntary buyout offers to roughly 8,750 U.S. workers. They're using a corporate strategy known as the Rule of 70.
Right, where if an employee's age plus their years of service equals 70 or more, they're eligible for the buyout package.
Exactly.
Which is a very specific strategic move. I mean, the Rule of 70 targets highly compensated veteran employees. It lets the company shed their most expensive payroll obligations and, clear up the balance sheet without generating the terrible press of a forced layoff.
Yeah, it's very calculated. And this brings the 2026 tech layoff total to over 96,000 workers. But here's the profound contradiction we really need to highlight. While Amazon, Google, Meta, and Microsoft are shedding all these jobs, they're simultaneously spending $650 billion on AI infrastructure capital expenditures just this year alone.
Wait, if AI is booming, why are the biggest AI players shedding tens of thousands of jobs? Are we seeing a direct one-to-one replacement of human salaries for AI servers? Like, are these companies literally saying, we don't need this human engineer because our AI can write the code? So let's buy a server instead.
Well, what's fascinating here is that we are witnessing a historic transition. For the last decade, the gold rush was in software, right? Hiring armies of engineers to develop the AI models themselves.
Right.
But the real wealth is moving to the picks and shovels of the AI boom. The capital is flowing into physical sensors, custom silicon, high bandwidth memory. It's a total pivot to hardware.
We actually have a perfect example of this from today's briefing. Over in China, a new tech billionaire just made an absolute fortune. But he didn't do it by building an AI chatbot or some clever software app.
No, not at all.
He built his wealth entirely on manufacturing image sensor chips used for robotics and autonomous systems.
Because an AI model needs eyes to interact with the physical world and needs to see.
Yeah.
And China's sheer scale advantage in manufacturing these physical components is just giving their hardware players an immense structural edge in the global market right now.
It's huge.
And for you, the listener, especially if you're a student or a professional navigating this industry, the job market is radically shifting right under your feet. School partnerships with big tech for internships are basically vanishing right at the exact moment that nationwide AI literacy programs are expanding.
Yeah, it's a really tough spot to be in. But let's circle back to that tension for a second. It's rarely a direct one-to-one replacement where an AI literally takes over a specific employee's desk, right?
Exactly. It is fundamentally about capital allocation. These companies have decided that physical infrastructure, securing the data centers, the power grids, the custom silicon, that's the only way to win the AI arms race. So to free up the billions of dollars needed to buy that land and build those physical assets, they're trimming their human headcount. They are literally choosing concrete and copper over payroll.
But pouring $650 billion into data centers requires resources that tech companies can't just write code for. They need land, water, and electricity.
Yeah.
And that is exactly where this digital gold rush is hitting a massive physical brick wall in our communities.
Yeah, you simply cannot spend that kind of money on physical infrastructure without fundamentally altering the landscape.
No, you really can't.
We are seeing fierce, highly organized local backlash against AI infrastructure. Communities are fighting new data centers over their unprecedented power usage. They draw so much water for their cooling systems that local agriculture is starting to feel the strain.
Oh, wow.
And residents are protesting the constant droning noise of the backup generator farms. It's causing real quality of life issues.
And it's not just zoning boards pushing back either. Labor unions are now demanding algorithmic auditing as a mandatory part of their contract negotiations, just to protect themselves against stealth automation.
That's a huge shift.
Yeah, and regulators are scrambling to catch up. The RAISE Act, which stands for the Responsible AI Safety and Ethics Act, just took effect.
Right, and this legislation places strict regulations specifically on frontier AI developers.
Right. And for anyone who might not follow the regulatory jargon, frontier AI refers to the bleeding edge, highly capable foundation models that push the absolute boundaries of current computing.
The really massive ones.
Exactly. These are the models that require supercomputers to train and could potentially evade human control. The RAISE Act requires these developers to meet intense transparency and safety reporting requirements before they can even deploy them.
At the same time, the White House released a national AI policy framework. Interestingly, this framework is heavily focused on competing with China.
Yeah, it explicitly calls out the need to close the technology gap and keep U.S. AI systems secure from foreign exploitation.
But rather than creating a single, centralized AI regulatory body, they are distributing the enforcement across existing federal agencies.
Which is a stark contrast to how the UK is handling this across the pond. Their Financial Conduct Authority just launched an AI lab sandbox for banks.
Oh, the sandbox model, right.
Yeah, they're basically letting major banks test AI in real-world financial conditions first, observing the outcomes, and then figuring out how to regulate it based on what actually happens.
It's the classic test-first, regulate-informed model. I mean, it allows for rapid innovation, sure, but it carries the risk of unforeseen market disruptions, unlike the heavy pre-deployment requirements we're seeing elsewhere.
Definitely.
But, the friction is not just confined to the financial sector or zoning boards. It is completely dominating our schools right now.
Oh, the classroom debate is absolutely wild today. 17 states are currently weighing legislation to impose strict screen time limits on students during school hours. And this has created, honestly, the most fascinating political alliance I think we've seen in years.
It really is bizarre.
You have actor Hugh Grant, Senator Ted Cruz, and Oprah Winfrey all publicly aligning to push back against the proliferation of ed tech.
Which tells you that concerns about the physical and mental toll of constant screen time have completely transcended traditional political boundaries. I mean, parents and educators are looking at the billions spent on ed tech over the last decade and seriously asking if it actually improved learning outcomes or if it simply isolated students behind glowing rectangles.
Yeah, and the AI-specific bills are just flooding the legislative floors. A new tracker shows 134 AI in education bills have been introduced across 31 states just this year alone.
Wow, 134.
Yeah. The most notable is South Carolina's HB 5253, which flat out bans AI from replacing licensed teachers in core instruction.
That's a strong stance.
And furthermore, the DOJ just extended the federal web accessibility deadline for schools a full year to April 2027. They were supposedly required to be compliant by today.
Right, and the mechanism behind that delay is important to understand. I mean, it's a huge relief for under-resourced rural and inner-city districts that simply could not afford to overhaul their websites to meet the technical requirements for screen readers and navigation aids.
It's an expensive process.
Very. But accessibility advocates are rightfully pointing out that a one-year delay for the schools means another full year of physical and digital barriers for students and families with disabilities. They rely on those tools just to participate in their education.
It feels like we're simultaneously trying to build the fastest car in the world and complaining that it's ruining the neighborhood. How do regulators even begin to balance this?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the gap between federal mandates, like that White House framework, and local grassroots realities, like zoning laws and classroom screen time debates, that gap is exactly where the actual future of AI will be decided. Washington can draft all the policy frameworks it wants, but if a local city council denies the water permit for your data center's cooling system, your AI simply does not get built. The physical world always gets a vote.
That is such a crucial point. The physical infrastructure is totally vulnerable to local politics. But while communities are fighting the highly visible data centers, the software we already trust on our computers is quietly being weaponized.
Yeah, we really need to examine the cybersecurity landscape today because the friction is not just physical anymore, it's deeply embedded in the enterprise tools we use every single day.
A China-linked advanced persistent threat group called Gopher Whisperer was just caught spying on Mongolian government systems. And their tactic is honestly brilliant and terrifying all at once.
It really is.
They didn't build some dark web communication network. They hid their malicious command and control traffic entirely inside Slack, Discord, and Microsoft Outlook.
This represents a fundamental shift in how cyber espionage operates. Historically, hackers would try to punch a hole through your firewall, and your security team would look for strange network traffic going out to unknown, suspicious servers.
Right.
But Gopher Whisperer is using a technique called living off the land.
Which basically means that instead of importing custom malware that modern antivirus software would instantly flag, the hackers use the administrative tools and applications already installed on the computer. They just use what is naturally there.
Exactly. And the command and control traffic you mentioned, that is simply the method the hacker uses to send instructions to the infected machine and extract the stolen data. By routing those instructions through Slack or Discord, it completely bypasses traditional security monitors.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is like a burglar hiding inside the police station. You don't check Slack for malware because Slack is your company's secure, approved workspace.
Right, your firewall just allows it.
Exactly. Your firewall allows Slack traffic by default. So the hackers just blend in perfectly with your normal business day. The researchers even noted that the hackers' operating hours aligned perfectly with the Beijing business day.
Wow. But it's not just messaging apps being exploited. We also saw an immense supply chain of attack hit the Bitwarden command line interface today. Specifically, version at bitwardens/client 2026.4.0.
And for those who might not know, Bitwarden is a hugely popular password manager. It's used by highly security-conscious developers in schools to store their most sensitive credentials.
Yep.
And Command Line Interface, or CLI, is a text-based tool developers use to interact with the software rapidly, basically bypassing the graphical menus.
Which is exactly why this is so dangerous. A supply chain attack works by poisoning the well. The hackers don't try to break into your specific computer. Instead, they compromise the official update package created by the software vendor itself.
So when the IT administrator types the command to update their secure tools, they unwittingly install the backdoor themselves.
Yes. If you or your IT department rely on Bitwarden CLI, today is the day to audit your environments and rotate your credentials immediately.
And the urgency does not stop there. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which essentially acts as the government's digital first responders, they just added 8 new vulnerabilities to its known exploited list.
8 of them.
Yeah, and there is a hard midnight deadline tonight for federal agencies to patch their Cisco routing devices against something called the Firestarter backdoor.
The mechanics of Firestarter are particularly nasty. It actually manipulates the router's memory allocation to maintain persistent access even after the device is rebooted.
Oh, that's bad.
It intercepts the network traffic at the hardware level before it even reaches the firewall. And while that patching mandate is technically only enforced for federal agencies, any school district, local government, or private business that uses Cisco gear needs to treat this as a 5-alarm fire.
Because threat actors are actively exploiting this in the wild right now. It is a relentless pace. I mean, we've gone from global naval standoffs to tens of thousands of corporate layoffs to hackers hiding in our Slack channels. So after unpacking all those heavy digital and physical threats, I think it's time to check what is trending online and end on something worth smiling about.
A shift in tone is definitely warranted.
First, just a quick nod to the sports world. The NFL draft is trending everywhere today. Specifically, the Green Bay Packers are dominating the conversation.
Oh,
They're
yeah?
making 8 picks after trading away their first-rounder from Micah Parsons, aggressively addressing huge needs on their offensive and defensive lines. Social media is just a beautiful, chaotic mess of fan euphoria and instant buyer's remorse, as is tradition.
Well, it wouldn't be draft week without the instant armchair analysis.
True. But the main positive takeaway today, and this is a really monumental one, the electric vehicle tipping point has officially arrived. Right. For the first time ever, the average new EV in the UK is cheaper than a comparable petrol car. The average EV is now listed at £42,620 compared to £43,405 for petrol.
Crossing that threshold is a profound milestone in technology adoption. And it's not just a statistical fluke either. It is the result of a very specific, sustained combination of government grants, aggressive manufacturer discounts designed to hit climate targets, and, of course, fierce competition from Chinese EV makers entering the market and driving down prices.
And the daily running costs aren't even close. I mean, charging at home costs between 2 and 7 pence per mile versus 12 to 20 pence for petrol. It is fundamentally cheaper to buy and cheaper to drive.
Yeah, the math is undeniable now.
So what does this all mean?
Well, if we look at the underlying psychology of technology adoption, the EV tipping point is actually a perfect parallel for the AI conversation we had earlier. For years, electric vehicles seemed like they were perpetually 5 years away,
Oh, definitely.
They were viewed as a luxury, a niche product, this wealthy early adopter experiment. Until suddenly, almost overnight, the charging infrastructure caught up, the pricing flipped, and they became the cheaper, mundane reality of everyday life.
Right, the adoption curve just goes from flat to exponential in the blink of an eye.
Precisely. Artificial intelligence is on that exact same curve right now, which leaves us with a critical question to ponder. Right now, companies are pouring $650 billion into the physical infrastructure of AI, the servers, the data centers, the power grids.
Yeah.
When that vast build-out is finally complete, and AI inevitably crosses the threshold to become cheaper than everyday human cognitive labor, what will our electric vehicle moment look like in the workplace? What happens to the global economy when running an artificial intelligence is simply cheaper than paying a human salary?
Wow. That is the $650 billion question right there. When the digital weight finally tips the economic scales, we started by talking about how the cloud isn't weightless at all, how it's constructed of copper and generators and heavy infrastructure.
It's all physical.
It is. And the
Yeah.
reality is, as that physical machinery gets built out across the globe, the weight of it is going to press down on every industry, every school, and every job market. The cloud might be invisible, but we are all going to feel its gravity.
Very well said.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it helped connect a few vital dots for you today. Stay informed, stay curious, and keep questioning the systems around you. Catch you next time.